Hello, welcome to Strictly Money at the News Farm, where all voices matter. I'm Saijal Patel. It's been more than a week since the 2022 federal budget was unveiled, and while much of the focus was on housing and environmental measures, there was one important proposal that, if you blinked, you may have missed. The feds outlined a plan to introduce a single nonprofit external body to address consumer complaints about banks. To help us break down the significance of this and what it means for investors' rights is Jean-Paul Bureau. He's the Executive Director at Fair Canada. Jean-Paul, great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.
So this is an amendment to the Bank Act and the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada Act to improve the way investor complaints are being handled or will be handled. What was wrong with the previous way things were done?
Well, they haven't yet made the change, so it's still the way things are being done today. But right now, the issue is that the banks get to choose who they want to use to help them resolve the complaints. So they call these the external complaint bodies. And right now, there are two that are formally approved at the federal level. One is OBSI, and the other is ADRBO. And so the banks get to choose where they want to ultimately bring their complaints to. The consumer has no choice. It's the banks that get to choose.
Okay. And I understand it's also for profit, the one that the banks get to choose, right?
Well, yes. So they can choose either one, but there's only one that is for profit, and that's ADRBO. And so that creates some, reasonable apprehension that maybe the banks will favor that one complaint handling body because one might expect that maybe that one body is a little bit more generous in terms of the favoring the banks because it is for profit. So one is reasonable to kind of question their motivation.
Okay, so now this change, can you explain that?
So the change going forward, and it's not entirely clear exactly how it will roll out. What we do know is the federal government is going to amend the legislation to remove the ability of banks to choose. We don't know, but we assume that the banks will be required to use OBSI going forward. And we assume that if it's not OBSI, it'll be another ombud service, but that it will definitely be a not-for-profit ombud service.
Okay. Jean-Paul, do you think this is exactly what was needed, or do you think they could have gone farther? And I guess what I'm trying to get at is are there still loopholes, do you think, that could be exploited here?
Well, there are still a lot of issues with the complaint handling system. This will definitely be a big improvement for bank customers. But there remains a fundamental problem, is that even though you can go through this entire complaint handling process, at the end of the day, the ombudsman's decision is not binding on the bank. So the banks are free to ignore it. And so that is a very fundamental flaw in the current system, and is something that Fair Canada has been advocating for quite some time.
Why do you think this has taken so long? I mean, when you look at the sort of these details, it just feels like there's some people who have been asleep at the wheel. Like, why is it taking so long? And I guess my second part is what's the timing of it? When could this pass?
Well, this issue of binding has been debated in Canada for over 10 years.
Wow.
And I know this on the securities regulators are working hard at trying to find a way to create a binding system. I think why it's taking so long is, the industry is not particularly willing to be bound by somebody else's decision in terms of how they should deal with their clients' complaints. And we have to be honest about that. But I think there are also some challenges, and some people will argue due process and the right of an appeal and, in terms of the decision that's made. And so there are some legitimate issues that need to be thought through and figured out without making the process even more complicated or time consuming than it already is.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Jean-Paul, this was not part of the budget announcement, but I've seen a lot of posts and comments about this. And this is the recent news that Ontario's finance ministry is now proposing a new set of rules governing employees in the financial services industry who use the title financial planner as well as financial advisor. How important is this?
It's an important development in Ontario. I think everyone's financial well-being is very important, and most of us have to turn to people to get some good advice when it comes to our personal financial situation. And so we want to make sure that we're dealing with people who are capable and competent and can give us good advice.
Okay, then who could actually use the term financial advisor that perhaps didn't fit the bill?
Well, the new legislation, it's actually now been proclaimed. So before it was proclaimed, anybody pretty well could call themselves, for example, a financial advisor. They didn't have to meet any minimum proficiency requirements or any educational requirements. They could basically just set up shop and call themselves a financial advisor and just, give advice. With the new piece of legislation that just came into effect in Ontario, you will now be required to meet certain minimum standards that are going to be established by what they call credentialing bodies. In a sense, you're going to have to take some courses through one of these bodies, pass their courses, and at the end of the process, you'll receive a credential saying that you're either a certified financial advisor or planner.
Okay.
So it's an interesting system, though, because the government is not they're not regulating financial planners or advisors directly. They are relying on these credentialing bodies to, set the standards and to monitor how their members are, meeting those standards.
Okay, so they're self-regulated bodies, really.
Yes, you could think of it. That would be a good analogy.
Okay.
So what the government will regulate is they will look at people who are using the titles as, let's say, financial advisor, who have not yet gone through one of those credentialing bodies. They'll police that kind of activity, but they're going to rely on the credentialing bodies to police the conduct of their members. So if you're getting bad financial advice from somebody who's a certified financial planner, you're going to have to take your complaint to the credentialing body where they got that credential from.
Okay. And does this mean that they will have fiduciary duty? I know that comes up quite a bit.
They're not subject to fiduciary duties. The credentialing bodies will have a requirement to have a code of conduct and ethics. And in that code of ethics, there will be a requirement based on what the government proposed that their members, the financial advisor, for example, act in the best interest of their clients.
Okay.
But that is not the same as a fiduciary duty.
Okay. Jean-Paul, we have about a minute and a half left. The last time you were on was at the end of October, and we talked about decoding investment fees and how those fees are not still fully transparent. Any update on this?
Yes, apparently the securities regulators are working on a project called the total cost reporting. And we're hoping that will, there'll be a concrete proposal made hopefully this year. We understand they're on track to do something. And it'll be an important development because once the proposal is adopted, it will give investors all the information in terms of all the fees they're paying, regardless of whether they're paying those fees directly or if they're paying those fees indirectly. So, we still have to wait, but there will come a day when investors will have complete information about the fees they pay as investors.
And where do they find this out? Where can they find more information about it?
Well, right now, investors get an annual report on fees and the performance of their investments, but that information does not reflect all the fees. So what I anticipate will happen is the regulators will make some changes to that annual fee report to require additional information.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.